Now recording.
Thank you, Peter. And today I bring you a story and a PowerPoint presentation. So allow me to share my screen here. Okay, I think you should be seeing screen there. Excellent. So right, I'm bringing you a story today, and there are many elements to this story. It's a personal story, but it's also allegorical and anecdotal. It's a scientific story, but it's also mythological. It's an adventure and a mystery, all wrapped together with twists and turns. And as you probably know, I've assembled an eclectic cast of characters for this story. And if your powers of deduction are sharp, you probably already know what the story is about. It's about the mysterious power of asking. Ask, and you shall receive. Yes, but ask whom? And for what? And what shall I receive? Shall I receive what I asked for, or something else entirely? Well, these are all great questions, my friends. As you can tell, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so dim the lights, grab the popcorn, and settle in. Our story takes place across time and space, but it begins in the year 2013 when a 30-year-old insurance underwriter suddenly realizes that he doesn't know shit. Pardon my French. And I'm actually French, so I can say that. The underwriter in question lives a good life, and he's very much aware that he lives a good life. He has a wife and a daughter that he loves very much. He has close friends and hobbies, a roof over his head, food in the refrigerator. But for whatever reason, there's like this kind of dead zone inside of him, a part of him that is profoundly empty. And because of this emptiness, he also feels aimless, dissatisfied, and ultimately confused. All he wants is to be happy. How many of us can relate to that? He spent his entire life pursuing happiness without success. And then one day it dawns on him that maybe, just maybe, he doesn't actually know what happiness is. He assumes that he knows what it is. I mean, he talks about it, thinks about it, even chases it around. But does he actually know what it is? Nobody's ever told him. He's never looked it up in the dictionary, and he himself has not explicitly defined it. Like when he looks within at his concept of happiness, he finds something vague, nebulous, unclear. What is happiness? Is it a feeling, a state of mind, a mood? You tell me, I'm serious. What is happiness? And if, like the character in our story, you don't know what it is either, aren't you curious to find out how that happened? How you went your whole life never truly knowing what it is? So while you ponder that question, let's travel back in time to Athens in the year 399 BCE for the trial of the man they call Socrates. The charges? Impiety and corrupting the minds of the youth. The penalty for these charges? Death by poison. That's a grande hemlock latte for Socrates. So what did this guy do to warrant such persecution from the state? How was he impious? How did he corrupt the minds of the youth? By asking too many questions. Yikes. It all started when Socrates visited the oracle at Delphi, who, by the way, was famous for always being right. And the oracle told Socrates that he was the wisest person on earth. Now, I think most of us here would be like, yeah, right on, that's awesome, but not Socrates. See, Socrates was all too aware of his own ignorance, and he knew that he could not possibly be the wisest person on earth. So he set out to prove the oracle wrong by finding people who were clearly wiser than he. He did this by going around Athens and having conversations with people, asking them questions about basic subjects such as truth, beauty, and goodness, so that he could clearly demonstrate that these people were all wiser than he was. But here's the thing, as he went around talking with people from all different walks of life, artists and tradespeople and nobles and all kinds of people, the opposite thing happened. The people with whom he spoke started each conversation really confident that they knew a lot about everything. But with each round of questioning, their confidence faded. See, Socrates' questions kept highlighting inconsistencies, contradictions, and gaps in people's statements until their narratives crumbled and they were forced to admit what Socrates already knew about himself, that they did not know. So from these conversations, Socrates learned a few things. First, he learned that our spoken words and conscious thoughts are like the tip of an iceberg. Below the surface, we find layers and layers of hidden meaning and association, layers of unspoken and unexamined assumptions, expectations, and implications. And here's the kicker. It's precisely these layers below the surface that shape and influence the tip of the iceberg, our thoughts and our behavior. Truth, beauty, goodness, happiness. These things sound like basic fundamental qualities that everyone should know. So what are they, really? This is the subversive power of asking questions. It can help us reveal and then deconstruct the underlying belief structures that shape how we see the world, how we feel about the world, and ultimately, how we behave in the world. The story of Socrates is a gift that keeps on giving, my friends. It teaches us so many important lessons. I think one of the most important lessons is a cautionary tale. It tells us that this method of questioning that he employed should be used on ourselves, like I should use it on myself rather than on other people. Because when you use it on other people, they're liable to get very annoyed with you and go to great lengths to shut you up. So Socratic inquiry, great tool. I don't recommend you use it on other people though. Use it on yourself. The other lesson is that you need a measure of humility in order to engage in this kind of questioning. To put it really simply, if you think you already know the answer, you're not going to ask the question. And that was the key to Socrates' success. He knew right from the start that he didn't know a damn thing. So he was able to pose questions most of us wouldn't even think to ask. Here's the formula for what we're describing here, which is the Socratic paradox, okay? Nobody knows anything, but some people think they know, even though they don't, while other people know that they do not know. Give you a second there. Some people know that they don't know. And according to Socrates, wisdom consists in knowing that you don't know. And that's why the oracle told him he was the wisest person on earth. Now, lest we think that this is a purely Western concept, Lao Tzu, the mythical figure credited with the wisdom of that amazing little book, the Tao Te Ching, said virtually the same thing. He says, not knowing is true knowledge. Presuming to know is a disease. That's a bit harshly worded, but I can tell you, before the year 2013, I presumed to know what happiness was, and I never bothered to investigate. I pursued a vague caricature of happiness, and I never understood why it eluded me. Now, once I realized I didn't know what happiness was, I started asking relevant questions, and things started to shift for me. However, the next step for me, the one that really allowed me to fully tap into this power, the power of asking, was to realize that my ignorance goes way beyond happiness. That in fact, I too, like Socrates, don't know a damn thing. I even drew a diagram, my friends, to illustrate my point. Do you see that little circle on the screen? That is the stuff I think I know. I don't know it. I just think I know it, okay? Very important distinction. Next up, we have the stuff that I know I don't know, right? Questions and mysteries that I'm aware of. I know that I don't know something. I can investigate it. It's great. But the most important circle of all is this one. That's all the stuff I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know that I don't know it, right? There's levels to my ignorance, folks. And yeah, maybe, just maybe you're in the same boat. I don't know. I can't speak for you. All I can do is tell you my story. Whenever I get a little bit too enamored with humanity's cleverness, get a little high and mighty about human achievements, I like to travel back to the year 1924, where astronomers know that the Milky Way galaxy is an island universe stranded alone in the infinite void of space. They know this, okay? So join me at the Mount Wilson Observatory in California, where in 1919, they built the world's largest telescope at the time. Enter Edwin Hubble, a brilliant astronomer with a question. What's a nebula? A nebula at the time had been known for a while. Astronomers had spotted these. They were like hazy blobs of light in the sky, right? And a couple centuries before, astronomers started to see them with their telescopes. And since then, astronomers named them, they cataloged thousands of nebula, but the whole time, nobody knows what they are for sure. We've seen them, they're there, but it's a mystery. We don't know what they are. This is the stuff we know we don't know, right? Whoops, uh-oh. Technical difficulty. This is stuff we know we don't know. Some astronomers, they think that nebula are just these diffuse stars. Others think that they're gas clouds. But here's the kicker, my friends. Both camps are spectacularly wrong. Using the state-of-the-art telescope and some clever calculations, Hubble turns his attention to these nebula, and he's able to demonstrate conclusively that they are, in fact, way too distant to be a part of our Milky Way galaxy. So then in 1929, Hubble's findings are finally published in a peer-reviewed journal, and suddenly astronomers know something different now. They know that nebula, rather than being gas clouds or diffuse stars, are entire galaxies unto themselves. So much for an island universe. Now, that's an example of a mystery that they knew about, right? What is a nebula? They knew that nebula existed, didn't know what they were. That's great. For an example of the stuff we don't know, let's skip back to the year 1800 briefly here. And there we will find another astronomer by the name of Sir William Herschel. And Herschel is experimenting with light. He has a question as well. His question is, does the temperature of light vary depending on its color? Now, to find out, he runs a beam of light through a prism, as you can see on the screen. And as you know, when the light enters the prism and comes out the other side, it's broken down into a rainbow of color. So Herschel is doing this, and he places the thermometer in the violet band of color, and then he places it in the blue band of color, and sure enough, the blue band is hotter than the violet band. So he continues to measure the temperature moving along the spectrum and confirming that the temperature does indeed increase as he moves toward the red light, which of course is the hottest of all the different colors of light. Fair enough. So when Herschel's finished with this, he puts the thermometer down on the table right next to the red band of light, but on the outside of the spectrum of light, right? So it's no longer in the light. He writes down some observations, makes a few notes, and then he goes to pick up the thermometer again, but lo and behold, he notices that the temperature is actually hotter now than when he measured the red light. How can this be? How can the thermometer be hotter if it's not even measuring light anymore? Unless, of course, the spectrum of light is vaster than we thought. And maybe some colors are imperceptible to the naked eye. Now, I'm sure some of you have already guessed, this is how Herschel discovered infrared light. He wasn't looking for it, didn't even know that it existed, stumbled onto it by chance, right? Didn't even know that he didn't know. Wow. So what's the point of these stories? The point is to keep us grounded in the right frame of mind for asking questions. The point of these stories is to remind us that knowledge is tenuous and temporary, soon to be replaced by newer, more refined models. Now, in the Zen tradition, they call this state of being beginner's mind, right? Assuming that you are a beginner, even if you're an expert. And that's how we can ask the subversive, life-altering questions that we've been talking about up until this point. Questions like, what is happiness? Asking these types of questions has helped me unearth, deconstruct, and then reassemble my belief structures in a deliberate way, in a way that I choose, rather than in the haphazard way that we tend to form our belief systems, which is through conditioning, cultural influences, and so on. So to me, this is ultimately freedom. The freedom to choose what you believe, to choose what you value, to choose what you think about and how you react to life's many curveballs. That's it, baby. That's freedom. But with freedom comes a new set of challenges, my friends. Personally, I found myself feeling a bit overwhelmed. It can be hard to make decisions. It can be hard to figure out what to do with yourself in a world of infinite possibilities, which is what happens when you start to question everything. And so this brings us to the final stretch of our story. In the 7th chapter of Matthew, Jesus famously tells his disciples, "Ask, and it shall be given. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." Now, an interesting tidbit for you folks, in the Gospels, Jesus asks hundreds and hundreds of questions, and he even answers other people's questions with questions of his own. Here's some of my favorite examples. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? And then this one, which I thought was just kind of funny without context. Why do you worry about clothes? Just some examples of questions that Jesus asked his disciples and other people when they went to him, right? Clearly, Jesus understood the power of asking questions as well as Socrates. But in the Matthew quote I just shared with you about asking and receiving, we sense that Jesus is referencing a different way of asking. You can ask questions, but you can also ask for something from other people, from yourself, or from a higher power. Ask and you shall receive is true in the first sense as well. When I asked questions, sought answers, I found them in books, in the wise words of friends and family, in peer-reviewed studies, and more. And those answers in turn yielded more questions, which produced more answers, and so on. Eventually, however, I reached an impasse. I stumbled onto questions whose answers could not be found out there in books or lectures or research papers. Who am I? What is my purpose? Ultimately, only I can answer those questions, but here's the problem. I had no answers. Thinking and rationalizing could not get me there this time. So whereas in the past I could use the mind and I could go into books and study and do research to answer my questions, here I was faced with questions I couldn't go out there to seek answers for. And so it happened that early on in the pandemic, a friend of mine, who I will liken to a shaman, facilitated an experience for me using plant medicine. Now, for those of you who don't know, plant medicine is just a new agey term for psychedelic drugs. So here I am, sitting in the grass on a sunny day, meditating with a journal in my lap and a pencil in my hand. I'm contemplating this question of identity and purpose. But in my altered state, I'm not trying to figure it out myself. Instead, I write my question down in my journal and I put it out there. I'm not asking myself, I'm asking the universe, God, or as I like to call her, the great teacher. Who am I? What is my purpose? And here's the magic, my friends, without thinking, without thinking, without any thinking whatsoever, my hand begins to write an answer. And the words on the page, they startle me, and then they surprise me, and then they delight me. I can tell you, my friends, they're not Oliver's words, but they speak to him directly, intimately, and the truth resonates in his bones. It was a profound experience. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, of course this happened to you, Oliver. You were high. Which, to be fair, is true. At the time, I was high. But here's the interesting thing, my friends. I came down and I kept asking. And guess what? I kept on receiving. So whatever it is that gives when you ask, it's there in sobriety as well. And it keeps giving as long as you keep asking. Now, of course, there's a certain way that I have to ask. There's a technique to it, if you will. And anybody who has studied the law of attraction or who has dabbled with manifesting will know what I'm talking about. But unfortunately, there's not enough time today to get into the details. The one trick I will share with you, the one that seems to work well for me, is to ask for things that are rightfully mine, right? Asking for things that are rightfully mine. I'm not asking for millions of dollars. I'm not asking to be famous. I'm not asking for a promotion at work. I'm asking to know how I can be a better father, a better husband, a better servant and messenger of love and unity in these times of fear and division. And then when I receive my instructions, I ask for the energy, the discipline, and the willpower to carry out the work before me. I ask for inspiration, as when I was struggling to write this very talk only a few days ago. I ask for clarity so that I can see and catch myself underachieving or reverting back into dysfunctional patterns of behavior, and so I can hold myself accountable. I keep asking for these things, my friends, and yes, I keep on receiving. It's amazing. Now, what I receive is not always what I want, but it always turns out to be exactly what I needed. And in the end, what I feel is overwhelming gratitude. Since I started asking in this way, not just asking questions, but asking, right? Strange and wonderful things have been happening to me and all around me. New friends and teachers have flown into my orbit, and an entire new spiritual community called the Center of Love has sprung up in my living room, of all places, where we meet twice a month. That's just scratching the surface, my friends. So many blessings, so many gifts. And I know some people might say it's coincidence. Some people might say it's just, serendipity. You can call it that if you like, but I know what they are. They're gifts. And those gifts are waiting for you as well, for everyone. All you have to do is ask. Thank you.